Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako, which is a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute, and I welcome you. Our viewers are across the world, and you're focusing in on Honolulu, downtown Honolulu, here at the Pioneer Plaza where kings have walked. My guest today is one of the leading business people here in the state of Hawaii. Leading because her business is seen by everyone on the streets all over the island, Charley's Taxi. Charley's Taxi is a venerable company here that shows that small business can succeed, even in a state that makes it sometimes difficult for small business to succeed. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our guest. We're going to chat a little bit about the heritage of this company, and then a very important issue today having to do with competition and the free market. But first, please welcome to my guest, my show today, Dale Evans. Dale, welcome.
Thanks for inviting me, Kelly.
Well, Dale, you're the president, the CEO of Charley's Taxi?
Yes.
But it's been a family business, hasn't it?
Yes, since 1938.
Charley, that was your dad, wasn't he?
Charles Morita was my father, yes.
How did he get into the taxi business?
Well, he came from Paia, Maui.
Is that right?
And then he was a motorcycle enthusiast, and then he loved cars, so he went to work for Universal Motors and Schumann, and then he was repairing cars, and he decided that he could put those to work, so he opened up Charley's Taxi in 1938, before the war.
Is that right? And what was it like at that time to operate a taxi service before the war here?
I don't know too much, but during the war, I heard that there were medallions or a limited number of taxis, and it was very bad for the consumers. So after the war, he and a couple of other taxi companies, Irish Taxi and Harrison Taxi, and they all worked together to make the taxi business here open entry, but based on standards of drivers, standards of vehicles, and safety.
Now, how did that all arise? Was it an agreement between the taxi companies that they would practice these standards, or was it the government that came in?
No, I think that they had looked at the evils of the medallion system, and they felt that there should be competition, but that it should be fair and it should be based on quality assurances so that to protect the public and the consumers.
So that while Hawaii after the war was becoming a real booming city here in Honolulu especially, a lot of development, a lot of building, the tourist industry was picking up, the military were here, so the taxi companies were growing at that time. But it sounds like you're saying they didn't want to be like the taxi companies in New York City or Detroit or Chicago. They wanted some differences here. What were some of those differences?
Well, it was every place else is practically all closed entry.
I see.
There are artificial limits on the taxis, and even after they had opened up the entry, they did have influx of yellow cab and other companies, but they didn't complain about it as long as everybody competed on an even playing field.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because I know that you are a believer in the free market.
Yes,
you believe in competition. You believe that government should have a limited and an accountable role.
Yes.
So that actually is part of the DNA of your company and your upbringing.
Right.
What did your dad think?
Oh, in fact, I think that he led our attitude as far as business. He was very careful about honoring what.
I'll let you put your microphone back on. That happens. It just came off there. You're talking about your dad.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we do think back, though, to the post-war era, and we go into the 60s and 70s, we look at Hawaii's kind of political climate in which we have just a small number of big players. But you're saying that in the taxi industry, there was competition, there was a desire to let new people into the market and so forth. Yes,
but the Motor Carrier Act didn't happen until 1961.
And what was that?
So that was
act?
after the statehood. But before that, another thing too is during the war, my father and mother were in the car rental business. They had a taxi concession or a car rental concession at Schofield. And they lost a lot of money on that because the soldiers or the sailors would run away with the cars, so they never found some cars.
How
But
about
things
that?
have, yeah. The thing that's interesting is the nexus between taxi and car rentals, because the owner of Hertz, the Hertz was the president of Yellow Cab,
Is that
New
right?
York City. Yeah.
Now, how did you get into the business? Did you start working for your family, or did you do something else for a while and then come back to the business?
Yeah, actually during high school, I would help my mother after school and before we went home. And then I went away to college, and then I worked in San Francisco. And then in 1967, she asked me to come home and help in the business. And I didn't want to be in the taxi business, but she needed help, so that's how I happened to be in
So it really is a family business, and you did that give your business a certain set of values, being a family business and family owned and run? Because I'm sure your family, you were raised with certain values.
Yes, as far as quality and standards, and to make sure that the cars were clean and that the drivers were neat, we always had those standards. And so it isn't. We have changed a lot since then, but the thing is, in basic customer service, I think that we're about the same.
What are some of the accomplishments you're most proud of under your tenure as the leader of the company? I know you've received many awards. You've been recognized as a small business leader. Well, what are some things that you feel that have been good that your leadership has brought to the company?
Oh, I think that in 2011, when we had to move our office, I decided at that point that we had to modernize our infrastructure. And that to me was a very big challenge, because I had just had a stroke in March, and then I had to move the office by July. So the thing is that I had to recover very quickly, and then in the meantime, I had to find out about all the things that makes the computer systems work. So we invested a lot of money into a computerized dispatch, and and I had to find out how to back it up and all the little things, because it's state of the art then. I wanted to be the best, but that was, I think, the biggest. Now, in 1950s, in the early 50s, my mother was the first 5 companies that invested in two-way radio. So our company has usually been ahead and innovative in use of technology.
In fact, you've invested a lot of money that, as you say, has kept you ahead of the curve.
Right.
I think there were times that you were even ahead of some of the public services like the police department in terms of communication and so forth. Would that ever have?
No, but the thing is that the police department uses similar technology as we do.
And so when we talk about the infrastructure for a taxi company, what is that exactly? What is the infrastructure?
Well, basically, like take for example the telephone.
All right.
The thing is, we changed to an ACD system where we had to have an automatic call distribution system, and then of course we always had our FCC radio license. But the thing is, when we added the computer, instead of staying with the radio system, we added the wireless system. So this is an internet-based system. It's different. Some other systems are radio-based, so they work on the radio voice, and then you have to turn it off and go to a data, and so it's cumbersome. Whereas this one, it's simultaneous. You can work both.
Do you have redundancy built in case one system fails?
Yes. Like on the telephones, in addition to the ACD, we have analog lines.
All right.
And then we have these wireless telephones on the desk, and so that,
Interesting.
we have direct lines in case the telephones go out. So that in fact, we don't stop just because of disasters. We can last for about 4 days.
So when we get a hurricane or we get some kind of disaster here, or systems go down, your taxi's up and running.
Yeah, I've been told that we're the only ones that are running.
And what kind of difference do you think that has made during those times? This is, I mean, certainly for the consumer, but for the whole state, I think it's an important thing to have a taxi cab service running.
Well, yes, that's true. But the thing is that, unfortunately, the state hasn't gotten to a point where they would allocate fuel for taxis and other important modes so that our drivers could get gasoline. But a lot of gasoline stations don't even have a generator. So there's no way for the drivers to get fuel.
Oh, I see.
So one day they're down.
Now, this is an interesting looking piece of equipment here. Tell us about this here. Maybe we can get the camera to zoom in on that.
This is a computer that's installed on the dash of the front seat for the driver. And this computer has different types of screens. And this is a trip screen. But this computer is there, and the credit card machine is swiped here, and it has a printer attached to it, and the taxi cab meter is inside the computer. So this instrument is what they call NIST approved. It's approved by the federal government, what they call the National Institute of Science and Technology.
NIST. And when something like this, state-of-the-art, is NIST approved, what does that do for the consumer? What's the value of driving in a taxi that has NIST approved equipment?
Well, all devices that are used commercially to charge people by weight or by distance and time has to be approved by the federal government. In other words, what they do is they set the standards for measurements to assure that the amount that is charged to the customer is reliable and it's true.
Oh, so it's just like going into a store,
right.
and you measure a certain quantity of a commodity.
Right.
You want to know that the weights and measures are accurate, that they've been approved.
That's right. If you go into a grocery store, then the weighing machine is NIST approved. If you go to a gas station, the gas pump is NIST approved. If you go into your car, the odometer is NIST approved. All of these devices throughout the country is approved by the federal government.
Now, I know that you are a liberty lover at heart. You like seeing as little government as is necessary for safety or for conducting commerce and so forth. So have you faced challenges with government regulation in your industry? This might be one, but it seems to be a happy resolution for you because it serves the public. But what are some of the challenges you've faced and some of the hoops you've had to jump through?
Well, the thing is that there is excessive regulations of our business. And like take, for example, the taxi dome that's on the top of the car. They tell us that we can't put it into the color and shape that we need. The law tells us what size, what dimension, what style it's supposed to be. I think that really goes too far.
Okay.
And then like take, for example, on fares, the taxi drivers are the only ones who are forced to take the loss on various government fees and taxes that they pay. So like take, for example, the GE tax, the EAT, there is a $5 or 7% pickup fee to pick up at the airport. The driver has to eat that loss. Every other transportation type of mode is able to pass on that cost. So there are things about the ordinance that are old or behind times or that are punitive. It's not fair, it's not equal rights.
Do you mean there's uneven enforcement of these rules, that some people are held to the highest standard, other people are allowed to get off?
It's not the highest standard. I think that that the thing is that they discriminate against the taxi driver.
Is that
and
right?
Because the taxi driver is a small business, it's harder for people to understand, accept that they shouldn't be penalized.
How have you managed to navigate through all of this instead of just giving up or going out of business or evading the rules and so forth?
Yeah, but we do, conform with the rules. That doesn't mean that we like it. And I keep on lobbying to make changes. So on the airport rules, I've been lobbying that over 30 years.
So yes, let's talk about the airport a little bit. You know, when a visitor arrives, a taxi is a very important thing because it gets you to Waikiki, to wherever you're going, and so forth. But there's a lot going on there that the average person just doesn't know. What do we not generally know about taxis and the airport?
Well, it used to be that the taxi used to have a concession, exclusive concession to one company. And even before the war, there used to be one company that had the limousines. And so we worked on that since 1963 to open that up. And in the 2006, or around there, we were able to get an open taxi system where all the taxi drivers of any cab company could go and work at the airport, provided that they register and have the proper insurance and the paperwork that they need.
So that should be a good thing then for competition
and
so forth.
That was a big win for us.
Well, then congratulations on that. Now, what else are you lobbying for in terms of airport and taxi? Any other changes you'd like to see?
I would like to see the taxi drivers be able to pass on the taxes and fees that other modes are able to pass on. That, I think, is a very big and our insignia, so that nobody can steal the dome and pretend that there are taxis.
Oh, I see. Now, there are companies that are entering the market and have recently entered the market that operate a little bit differently. Like, isn't there one company that uses smaller, more environmentally friendly vehicles and ecologically sensitive? And have they received some kind of benefit compared to the other taxi companies?
There is a company that is maybe 1 or 2 years old, but we only operate big cars because Hawaii is a leisure and recreation market. So the tourists and the families that come here are usually passengers of 4 or 5, and they need luggage room. So all of our taxis are large, and it saves the customers money because then they don't have to hire 2 cars and pay double the fare.
If you have a few pieces of luggage, you're going to need a big trunk and so forth.
And people who are here on conventions, they are parties that want to share a taxi when they go to dinner. So that there are about 4 or 5 or 6 people that want to share, and that's how.
Are any preferences at the airport being given to these newer cars, these more ecologically friendly cars, the smaller ones?
They asked for exemption, but the thing is that, you know, like I said, if you are a tourist market, the people want luggage room, and they want to put more people in it to save money.
Well, your cars are certainly kept to a very high standard because of your own values in the company and your drivers and so forth. What are some of the things you do to ensure that your drivers are safe, that they're well trained, that they will honor the customers?
Well, we have at least 1, sometimes 3 safety classes a year. We have extensive driver education. Our drivers, however, do appreciate it, and the trainers tell me that the drivers really enjoy the classes because there's a lot of interaction, and they tell their own little stories. So they come. We don't have trouble for them to attend the safety classes because they learn a lot.
Well, that's probably why your company has such a good reputation. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your company. And when we come back from this quick break, I'm going to ask Dale Evans of Charley's Taxi to talk about one of the new challenges in the market, a challenge made possible today because of technology, because of changing market trends and so forth. And she'll talk a bit about how she's handling that. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. You're watching ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network, and you can take a look at all of these programs at thinktechhawaii.com. Please come back right after this short break.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha and welcome back to Ehana Kako. It's a weekly program on ThinkTech Hawaii's broadcast network. I'm Keli'i Akina. Ehana Kako means let's work together, and that's what we believe at the Grassroots Institute. Let's work together to build a better government, society, and economy. The lady I have with me today is certainly doing that. Dale Evans' name is known not only in commercial circles, but also in circles of people who care a lot about the free market, about individual liberties, and about building a better economy and society. And so I'm very pleased to be able to talk with her today, especially as we look at a new issue facing the taxi market. So we're back here again with Dale. Dale, right now, the average consumer can easily think exclusively in terms of what's quickest, what's cheapest, what's fastest, and so forth. And that may be the case with a new contender in the taxi market, companies like Uber and other quote-unquote ride-share companies. This has come to Hawaii. What are you observing about this trend now?
Okay, the thing is that they act like a taxi or limousine company, although they say that they are simply app developers. But basically,
App developers, you mean application developers
yes,
on your
for
phone?
these smartphones.
Because that's generally the way people are in touch with those who provide these rides, by communicating through their mobile app, their telephone.
Well, that's one way, because historically everybody calls up or walks up to a taxi stand, and now there's websites, and there are faxes, and there's SMS, which is texting. So there's various ways to book, but this smartphone is one way of booking, but it's not the only way. But they use this phone for credit card charges and other things that they pretend that they're not a taxi company or limousine company. They are doing taxi and limousine businesses.
It sounds like you're saying they are merely, or they claim to merely broker a ride between a customer and a driver. But you call them taxi companies.
Well, I consider them so, but except that they don't follow any of the laws. And as I told you, we have consumer protection laws, we have safety laws, and we have quality assurance laws. Okay,
so the problem then that you see is that these services are exempt from the kinds of regulations and laws that cities and counties and states have set up to protect the consumer.
They're not exempt.
Okay.
These companies are very defiant and flaunt the law. They know what the laws are, but their attitude is that we will go into the states or places where there is least regulation enforcement, and then if they try to make us comply, we won't. And then if they issue cease and desist orders, then they will simply pay the driver's citation, they'll pay for the towing, they'll pay for the attorney's fee, but they will keep on operating. So they're operating in defiance of the law. They don't care because they are so heavily financed. Uber is supposedly valued at $18 billion, and they have a lot of Wall Street backers. So their whole thing is to come in and capture the market and eliminate the taxi operators. But you know, in the United States, the taxi cab is the only form of non-subsidized transportation that goes into small communities, that go into small neighborhoods that are not served at all by transit, public transit. And the thing is that of all the total taxi operators in the United States, only 6% of the total operate fleets of over 100. So you're talking about an industry that is predominantly small business.
Okay, now that's an interesting thing, because sometimes I've heard that the defenders of Uber and so forth are saying that they are an antidote to monopolistic control of the industry and big business. But what you're saying, let me see if that I can get back to that figure. 6%?
6%.
Of the taxi industry could be classified as big business. The rest is
Well,
very
not
small.
really, because it's 6% operate fleets of 100 or more.
Or 100 or more.
100
So
or more.
94% are fleets of 100 or less.
Yes, that's right.
Like here in Hawaii.
Right.
How much of the industry in Hawaii here is 100 cars or less?
Just about 2 of us.
Okay. And so it would be hard to characterize this as being an industry that controls the most of the traffic and most of the drivers and so forth.
Right, and also in Hawaii, or our island, it is open entry. Anybody can, as long as you meet the standards, then you are able to operate. On the other islands, there are artificial limits.
So what you're saying is that there's this one group that's trying to evade the laws completely and not comply with laws that are imposed upon the legitimate taxi companies.
Right.
But most of these legitimate taxi companies are companies of a small number of cars that are trying to jump through the hoops and obey the regulations. And so that's kind of like a double whammy, that they're trying their very best and paying money, like your company does, in order to comply with the regulations.
Right.
Now, you feel that some of the critical magazines and libertarian journals have been a bit unfair in terms of their characterization of the traditional taxi cabs.
Oh yes, I think that it's ridiculous for them to call us crony capitalists.
Who's calling you a crony capitalist?
Competitive Enterprise Institute.
Okay, now that's a libertarian journal.
There was a recent commentary. There is Reason has come out with some articles, and Cato has come out with one. I think that they do not understand the transportation business. So a lot of it is disinformation, and unfortunately, because Uber, a lot of people think that it's real cool because of the technology. A lot of people do not understand that the taxi industry is at the forefront, has always been. For the past 50 years, they have been at the forefront of technology. This system is developed by the taxi cab industry. And
now,
it's much more sophisticated than just a smartphone. But the thing is, the operators voluntarily comply with the laws. It's another thing to have somebody come in and flaunt the laws and don't have any rules, or do not provide insurance, proper insurance in case people get into accidents and get killed, that they can gouge customers and charge them hidden fees that are not shown, and where the customers are cheated in different ways, and that their safety, they are giving out customer information so that women complain that there has been stalking and sexual harassment. And there's basically the built-in regulations have addressed these kind of issues, like the fingerprinting and the police department check of criminal backgrounds. They do their own internal, but it's not sufficient like the law enforcement.
Now, this is very interesting listening to you, Dale, because I think in this town, you have been a champion to fight cronyism. Crony capitalism and a single control political system or commercial system and all of that. And you have championed the cause of the independent small business person. And now it seems as though your efforts to run a competitive small business and cooperate with others are being called crony capitalism.
Right.
And I'm sure that doesn't make you feel good. But what I'm hearing you say is, even though you have such, if you don't mind me saying, a libertarian spirit, you seem to see a role or a place for some measure of government regulation.
Oh yes. Like take for example, there are safety laws on automobiles. There are safety laws, or like take for example, you can't transfer a car unless the odometer is not been tampered with. So there are many types of laws that are protect the consumer. You want to have a driver's license so that you know that they they're going to observe the rules of the road, and they know what the rules are. So yes, there are necessarily laws, so that because the consumer themselves do not have the means to check all of these things to protect themselves.
Well, you know, this is a very interesting conversation. Let me play devil's advocate for a little bit. Sometimes at home when my children, before most of them grew up and went off, would be around the dining table, they'd know of my own libertarian leanings. And so we'd talk about, why do we need government regulation at all? And my daughter once said, Daddy, if we don't have anybody regulating restaurants, and a restaurant serves food that makes people die, won't people just figure out not to go to that restaurant, and then those restaurants will be out of business? What if we applied that to the business of matching drivers and passengers with each other, and say, well, won't the free market just work out all of the problems and so forth? Won't ultimately people end up going with the good drivers and the good cars, and the bad cars and the bad drivers will be out of business? Does it work that way, or do we need to have the hand of government involved in this?
Well, the thing is that, like, it takes Uber has been in business for 5 years, and they're only now beginning to realize all of the, like, take for example, there was a child killed in San Francisco 2 years ago on New Year's Eve, okay, and that showed that there was no insurance, and they still don't have insurance for when customers are in the car. There's no, like, take for example, even to do business in the state of Hawaii, Lyft is not licensed to do business in the state of Hawaii. They're not registered with the DCCA. They don't have a tax control number. And so the thing is that you have people that are coming here. The public has no way of knowing what kind of businesses they are. They have no way of contacting them in case they have a claim or they want to dispute something. And the thing about this instrument is that if a customer wants to dispute a fare, there's no way that the driver can change the fare, because the fare is automatically recorded by the app. So if they are overcharged, the driver can't change it. They're automatically charged. They are automatically charged a 20% tip. They are automatically charged a surge pricing if the number of drivers on the road is less than the amount of calls that are coming in. And this kind of surge pricing goes to show that price gouging is very easy to program with this kind of device. They can't do it with a taximeter. So they have that, and then they have what they call prime time tip. Lyft has a prime time tip, so that during peak hours, and then the customers are going to be charged a tip, and sometimes the tip exceeds the amount of the fare. So these kind of things would not happen in a regulated environment where people have recourse to complain and to have a settlement, because the app companies will say they are not responsible. So if you lose something in your car, they said that it's your fault that you lost it there, and it's up to you to settle it with the driver. The driver will say, oh, but it's not my fault that you left something in the taxi. So the complaint never gets resolved. So the customer has no way of retrieving their lost item.
Well, you certainly are making a strong case for the importance of the government playing a role to regulate for the protection of the consumer. But you've struggled with that too, where the government has overreached and made the regulations onerous for the industry itself and for the consumer. How do you find, where's the line drawn? What's the difference between the government being too involved and not involved enough?
Well, I think that there are so many laws that are old and archaic, and also because it hasn't kept up with the modern practices of doing business, you know. So that's how come that in practice it doesn't work. That there are certain things that you have to, like, take for example, the GE tax was 4%.
Right.
Well, when it was raised to 4.5%, again, the driver took another 0.5% loss, just simply because they couldn't pass on that tax. I mean, these are really unacceptable types of punishment to the drivers, you know.
Well, thank you. You know, this was an interesting introduction to some of the struggles that are occurring with a new entry to the market. And we're going to come back and close up by talking about some principles about how we can differentiate between not enough regulation and too much regulation. We're talking with Dale Evans, who's experienced that battle all her career with Charley's Taxi, and today is experiencing that with a new entry to the market. I'm Keli'i Akina. You're watching ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We'll be back with our concluding segment right after this.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard, and I host the show Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series right here every Wednesday from 2 to 3 Hawaii time. I would really love to have you watch the show and see what we do here. I talk with some of the most amazing people, artists, most of them, all of them involved in some sort of artistic process. And our goal here on the show is to dig into that artistic process, and you would not believe what some people say, what some people do, what people go through to express. And these are people who have to express somehow, and I find that infinitely interesting. Not only that they have to express, but how they end up doing it. I really hope that you will watch the show and enjoy talking with some of these people the same way that I do. Thanks, and I hope to see you soon on Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series, Wednesdays from 2 to 3. See you soon.
Aloha and welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, and I'd like to express my thanks to Jay Fidel and the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. What an excellent service this is, producing original content every week, maybe somewhere between 25 and 30 hours, going out across the world, underscoring the fact that Hawaii is part of the world and the world is part of Hawaii, and we need both together here. Today has been a fascinating conversation, and I want to qualify it by saying it's only been an introduction. We've been able to take an in-depth look at one industry and how it's facing a new competitor in a time of new technology as well as a new way of marketing. And I don't think we'll be able to resolve the whole issue today. The jury will still be out. But I respect the lady with whom we've been talking, Dale Evans, because she's been trying to do something as a champion for the people and for business, which is navigate the relationship between government and industry, and has been doing so for nearly 50 years with Charley's Taxi, and today sharing with us her insights. Dale, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I appreciate it. But you mentioned something during the break, that you feel that despite the battles you fought in trying to bring a proper balance between government and business, that you feel that there's just still a long way to go, that you feel that you haven't accomplished much. Actually, those who've watched you know you've accomplished much, but why do you feel that it's still such an uphill battle, especially here in Hawaii?
I guess because my goal has been to innovate more services for the public and to augment the public transit system so that more people will have mobility choices. That's very important. And also because I think that people do not realize that there are solutions to traffic congestion, that we don't have to have this level of bad roads. You know, there are many things that can be done, but it seems that the transportation issues takes a second place, and every single business, every single person or driver, and people who ride in cars, they are all affected by transportation. And unfortunately, they are paying for this inefficiency. They're paying for the inadequacy of our road system. We have the lowest per capita road miles in the whole United States and territories. And yet we can't seem to get that fixed. But we are spending billions of dollars on a system that's only going to change ridership maybe by 1%.
And you're talking about fixed rail.
Yeah, that's unimportant compared to what the needs of the businesses and the motorists are.
Why do you think government seems to be non-responsive to solving this problem? You talked earlier about giving individuals the freedom to choose the most options and so forth. You described earlier in our show today, the entry into a market of a competitor where it doesn't seem that government has a comprehensive approach to resolving the situation. What do you think the problem is with government here in Hawaii?
First of all, I think that they just are not, they don't realize, and it's not peculiar only to here. I think that, like, take for example, I've never seen any type of business, I don't care which type of business, that has come in and made this kind of entry into the business in such a way that they defy laws. I have never seen this. And so I think that in that way, it is hard for the regulators who have never had to deal with people who defy the laws. They just think everybody's going to follow the law. But in this situation, because they have so much money and so much power, and they have hired lobbyists and marketing throughout the world, that it is something that they cannot ignore. However, cease and desist orders are not going to, is not going to solve the problem, because they figure they can ride it out, just pay the fines and keep on operating.
Well, it's ironic to hear you speak, as you mentioned earlier, that some of the libertarian magazines and sources have accused taxi companies of being the crony capitalists. But when you describe the information services, Google and so forth, the monies behind them as being the driving force of Uber and so forth, wouldn't that be the crony capitalism?
That's what I think.
So it's an interesting, interesting perspective. It really is. Before we go, you know, you have such insight into transportation issues and so forth. What's a good priority for our government to focus on coming up in the next few years? What can we do really to improve the transportation systems here and the options in Hawaii?
Well, the thing is that, you know, to build our economy, the economy should not only be on just jobs. It should be able to that the people who are in business and have jobs can make more, be more productive. And so you're talking about it's not only creating new business. What you want to do is to support existing businesses. So there are many things that the politicians just think that they have so many things on their plate, but they don't realize it's really important to take care of what there is now. They should do repair and maintenance. They should take care of everything that they have now before they go spending on things that have very little return, you know. So like the condition of our roads, the condition of the traffic congestion, those things should be addressed, because then it'll make businesses more profitable so that they can hire more people and that they can rev up the economy.
What can we do to make sure laws are enforced better? You're talking about market entry now, where the laws are being defied and so forth. Do we need to be policing more? Do we need to have stronger government, stronger fortitude amongst politicians? What do you think the answer would be there?
You know, I think our political leaders are misleading the public because they themselves are not following the law. They don't follow the Constitution. Every day, our president breaks the law. There are so many instances where the laws are frustrated because the leaders are not setting a good example. So what's happening is that even in our schools, the children are not learning values and standards and things like that that will make them more successful instead of being on the dole, you know.
So when our government leaders model the way by obeying the law, then we may have hope that the rest of society will.
That's right.
Well, thank you. You know, I wonder if you'll ever run for the office. I'd vote for you.
No, thank you.
Dale, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for serving our community with Charley's Taxi.
Thank you.
My guest today, Dale Evans, president of Charley's Taxi, knows what it is to build a thriving business here in Hawaii, knows what it is to navigate the relationship between government and business and regulation and all of that. And so I hope you've enjoyed her insights today. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, signing off for ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. This has been Ehana Kako. We'll see you next week. Aloha.